So we'll come back to resistance. So some really, really interesting things here. I often say when you look at our general cyclists who ride around in Perth, the classic ride is the loop around the river, which if you go the really steep way, you might have 1-5% climb that's about 800 metres long, and that's about as heavy as it gets there. So basically most of our cyclists who are moving around the river, the weight isn't actually all that important, and the wind resistance becomes very, very important there. So it's really interesting to look at those couple of little things I've put up on there that, 1 kilogram of weight difference for a cyclist going at 40 k's an hour, so it's a pretty useful cyclist, the sort of thing that James would expect to do over an hour. If you drop a kilo at that speed over an hour, you're going to save 1 second. 1 second for a kilo. So 8 kilo bike, $2,500, 7 kilo bike, $5,000. Rough numbers to throw around. So 1 second if you're doing flat riding there for that weight. The classic statement for a lot of my athletes or weekend warriors who come through is they've got a kilo and some that they could drop off their body if they were really worried about that side of things. But that's just part of the story there. Now, when you start climbing hills, 7% gradient, so Summer Greenmount Hill, Kelmscott, those sort of areas around there, you're heading 5, 6, 7% there. So you can see, once again, an hour of climbing, you're going to gain 150 metres. You're still going to turn around and yell at your mate behind you and tell you how much more you spent on your bike, that sort of thing. So, until you're doing some serious climbing, they're small amounts. Now, let's take that to a professional level and look at Cadel Evans losing a Tour de France by 12 seconds a number of years ago. We'll try and forget about the drug side of things and what else that happened there, but 12 seconds over 3,000 k's, that 3,000 k's, 100 hours of cycling, somewhere there about there, so that second per hour, that's a couple of minutes. So for a professional cyclist who's already as light as he can be, as fit as he can be, every gram on the bike becomes extremely important. So once again, there's that difference between our professional cyclists and our amateur cyclists and what they're trying to achieve there. Okay, so wind resistance. General numbers, 70 to 90% of the resistance to moving forward on a bike is air resistance. Now, the big thing about it, it's an exponential equation. You can see the shape of that curve heading up there. The faster you go, the more important your bike position and your aero is on there, basically. And one of the first questions I ask my cyclists who come in for a bike fit is, what do you want to do? So the next, classically at the moment, half Ironman coming up in 6 weeks' time. And I'll straight up say, okay, what's your expected time? What do you think your bike splits are going to be? To 90k ride, they go, oh, I'm hoping to go under three hours. All right, so 30 k's an hour. Wind resistance is starting to get important, okay? Head to the first timer who says, I don't care, I just want to finish it. Okay, so someone who's less worried about how fast they're riding, that exponential equation, resistance becomes less of a problem there. So we're starting to think a lot more about their comfort, a lot less about how low they're going to be. Go to our professional level. James doing his first busso this year, I think. Yep. So, expecting to ride over 40 k's an hour, maybe 45. He's pushing really well. Wind resistance is everything for him. So then we've got to start finding that balance between wind resistance, power production, and unfortunately doing a triathlon, you've got to get off and run 21 k's afterwards. So then we start looking at our triathletes versus our time trial cyclists. And then the other big thing there is how long they're going to be on the bike for. 2 and a bit hours versus 4, 5, 6 hours for an Ironman versus a 200 metre flying sprint for a track cyclist and that. So the comfort that they require there versus the wind resistance. These are all the sort of equations we're tossing up when we're trying to get someone in a good position on the bike. So the interesting things coming down from there. So wind resistance, a big one. Rolling resistance, which is cyclist and tyre friction there. So it's a reasonable amount there. So having the right tyres, and once again with our higher level guys, 1% is a lot over a lot of time on the bike there. So they're pretty important. Transmission resistance, which really comes down to the gears, the chain, all those bits and pieces, 3 to 5%. They're the sort of rough numbers that get thrown around there. So they are really good to keep in mind. But that wind resistance one, I think, is just always something to keep in the back of your mind. If you've got someone who wants to ride fast, you've got to be looking serious at their aerodynamics.